Just before we get into this video, guys, if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, the links are here. And if you also want to support me on Patreon as well and help out my channel, that would be absolutely awesome as well. But let's get on with the video. Hey guys, it is Wingy here and welcome to a brand new video and the second part of my ranking Doctor Who series, something that I really need to change the name of because one of these days I'm going to come out and say wanking Doctor Who, and that is not the message I want to send on my channel. Maybe when the views dry up I'll consider it. Okay, so in this part I'm going to be talking about the different doctors. Now this is something that I get asked a lot. Tell us your list of favourite doctors from best to worst. And I've always sort of put it off because I know that what I think of certain doctors, some people might think, well, why are they so low or why are they so high? But the thing is, for me, I love all of the doctors. Some are better than others, yes. But the point is, I've never really thought about listing my favourite doctors. I think at this stage it's fairly obvious who my favourite doctor is, and if you don't know that already, then you'll find out at the end. But as always, this is my own personal opinion, so if you happen to disagree, it does not matter in the grand scheme of things. I'm not trying to take anything away from any of the doctors that are lower down, because like I say, I love them all for different reasons. But you guys wanted me to rank them, so this is what I'm doing. So without further ado, let's get on with it. So, kicking off then, we're going to go from number 12 to number 1. Obviously, I'm not going to include Jodie Whittaker on this because she's not started yet, and I'm not going to rank her on this list based off of a 2-minute scene. That would be stupid. Even though to some people, she's already their favourite Doctor, and I still don't know how. Anyway, starting off with number 12, I'm going to go with William Hartnell, the First Doctor. Now, whilst yes, he is the Doctor that introduces us to the show itself, and for a lot of people, he is the definitive Doctor, and for a lot of people, William Hartnell is the template on how you should play the Doctor. Me though, the reason why I put him last is for a very trivial reason, I guess. William Hartnell's era of Doctor Who is the one that I find myself revisiting the least. I've seen Doctor Who in its entirety, but obviously I've seen certain stories and certain eras multiple times. When it comes to the Hartnell era, I've probably watched it the least. It's not that he's a bad Doctor, because I do enjoy him, but the thing is, I don't really have a massive urge to go and watch his era or any of his episodes that often. So for that reason, I'm gonna have to rank him as number 12. But like I say, even though I'm saying he's number 12, that's not me saying he's a bad Doctor or he's the worst or anything. Well, it kind of is me saying he's the worst. But no, I just watch him the least. That's why. In at number 11, I'm going to go with the 10th Doctor, David Tennant. Now it's weird because this guy used to be my favourite Doctor, and how he's ended up from 1st to 11th, I don't know. Now the thing is, again, I do like Tennant's era and I do like aspects of the 10th Doctor, but I think when you see The End of Time and then you re-watch the rest of his era with the context of The End of Time, the 10th Doctor seems like a completely different person. There's a lot of arrogance in Tennant's performances, and I'm not even talking about the whole, well, obviously the Doctor's a genius, so he's going to be arrogant about it. People would argue that Colin Baker's Doctor is more arrogant, but I would argue that Colin Baker's Doctor is arrogant for the right reasons, whereas Tennant's Doctor comes across like he's arrogant because he's dead handsome. Sure, he's arrogant about his intelligence sometimes, but the fact that he had his own vanity regeneration kind of makes you think twice about this guy. I've spoken about it in a couple of videos before, but the whole rant in The End of Time really pisses me off, and I hate the romantic interest with Rose as well. I'm also not a massive fan of his whole sort of emo phase where he's just like, oh, the Time War, I'm so depressed. I think they handled it a lot better with Eccleston's Doctor as opposed to Tennant's. Again, I still enjoy the Tennant era and it's got some gems in there, but yeah, the 10th Doctor's not that high up for me. Sticking with the number 10 then, I'm going to go with Paul McGann, the 8th Doctor. Now I am basing this purely off of the TV show, so I know that whilst the 8th Doctor is incredibly popular and incredibly well written on Big Finish, he only technically had 2 appearances in the actual show. But the thing is, I really love the TV movie. I really do. It's a very underrated story in my opinion. And let's be honest here, who watched The Night of the Doctor and then didn't think, oh my god, we need a new Paul McGann series? Everybody thought that. The reason he's so low on this list is because, like I say, even though Big Finish has explored him quite a bit, in terms of TV, we haven't seen him that much, and I wish we got more of him, but like on audio, this would be a different story altogether. I will say one other thing though about McGann's Doctor as a sort of negative. He doesn't really stand out to me as the Doctor. He plays it brilliantly, but there's nothing nothing really stand out. You know, you'd say sort of Eccleston is the PTSD one, Patrick Troughton's like the mischievous little tramp. Why did I just call the second Doctor a tramp? But no, you get what I mean, like he doesn't really stand out, he's not got a thing. I'm leaving that in. That'll do. Next up, we are going with the 6th Doctor, Colin Baker. Now, I really didn't want to put him down really low on my list, but when you look at the other Doctors and how much I like them all, I couldn't put anyone behind Colin. Like all the others, they have to be above him. Now, Colin gets a bad rap as the Doctor, but he is brilliant and I love him. Yes, his era was met with a lot of different things, both within the show and outside of the show, that really affected his era in a bad way. The costume, the breaks, the inconsistent writing, the lack of development for Colin's character. But what Colin really does is he brings a real theatricality to the Doctor. Now, some would argue that this isn't necessarily a good thing, but I personally love it. Colin is most definitely the most bombastic of the Doctors, and I really enjoy seeing him on screen. Sure, he has his questionable moments like strangling Perry, which we're not going to remind you of here, although I just did, fuck's sake. But he also has some of his charming moments, and he's also just pure Doctor moments as well that is really fun to watch. Also, I think Colin's era as a whole is pretty underrated, so I didn't want to put him last like a lot of people do, and that wasn't why. I genuinely do like Colin's Doctor a lot. Going in at number 8 then, we have Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor. Now the thing is, like I said to you before, David Tennant was my favourite Doctor at a time, so when he left, Matt Smith was the one that took over from my favourite Doctor at the time, and he just nailed it. Matt Smith is incredible as the Doctor, and I guarantee not many people gave him a chance at first. I don't mean just like seeing his first episode and thinking, nah, he's still rubbish, he's no David Tennant. I mean like when they first saw him, there was a lot of backlash saying, oh, he's too young, he looks weird, we haven't seen him in anything. But he proved everybody wrong. He hit the ground running with the 11th hour. And Series 5 is my favourite series of the new series. Matt Smith took on a role at that time would have been pretty much impossible. Arguably the most popular Doctor of all time has just left, and then some unknown kid comes in and takes over. Somehow it works. His charisma, his alienness, you can tell that he borrowed aspects from Patrick Troughton's Doctor. And even though he's not my favourite Doctor by a long stretch, I still really enjoy him and his era. Okay, number 7 is the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. Now, barring his first season, I've got to say Sylvester McCoy has a fairly solid era. Season 25 and the last season, season 26, they have some of the best Doctor Who stories in the entire series. I love seeing McCoy's character develop from Time in the Rani all the way up to Survival. He's a very clownish figure, he's very sort of over the top, but then by the end of his run, he's this really dark, mysterious character, and he's doing things that you wouldn't expect the Doctor to do. McCoy is arguably both the most light-hearted and the most dark of all of the Doctors. He's also the biggest trickster as well. He has tricked multiple different of his enemies and villains into doing things that really seem out of character for the Doctor, but he somehow makes them work. Example of this being the Hand of Omega with the Daleks. He just happily blew up all the Daleks in Skaro. Cool. It's just a shame that his era was prematurely cut short. Okay, so we're at the halfway mark now, and I'm going to go with the first Doctor that I ever saw at number 6 with the 9th Doctor, Christopher Eccleston. Now, I really wanted to put Eccleston higher, but the thing is, he only stayed for one series, and I can't put him up any higher than this. I love Eccleston's Doctor. He was my first one. He brings something to the role that we hadn't seen before, and I don't think we're ever going to see again. This is the damaged Doctor, the Doctor with PTSD, and Eccleston manages to convey that with such raw emotion and yet still manages to balance it with such wonderful humour at the same time. He can be there cracking and joking one minute, the next he's pulling such a really serious face and you know shit is about to happen. He has given us some of the best performances that any Doctor has ever done, whether it's where he's locked alone in the cell with the Dalek or where he essentially just gives up in parting of the ways. Eccleston introduced a brand new generation of children to Doctor Who and the character of the Doctor, myself included, and for that I will always love him. However, the fact that he doesn't really associate himself with Doctor Who much anymore, that does kind of piss me off. So we are into my top 5. So at number 5, I'm going with the 2nd Doctor, Patrick Troughton. This really is one of my favourite Doctors, and one of the reasons why I think is because Patrick Troughton plays the Doctor the way that I imagine the Doctor should be. I mean, yeah, there were elements with William Hartnell's character, but I think with Troughton it's the first time you really get a sense of the fact that this guy is an alien. And let's not forget as well, he had the most difficult job out of any Doctor that there is ever going to be. be. I know people would argue that Jodie Whittaker has a tougher job, but I really don't think that she does. You have to give it context though. I mean, Troughton was the first of the new doctors. People had only seen William Hartnell before. They didn't know any different. Back then, regeneration wasn't even a named term. So all of a sudden you have this older grandfather-like figure just regenerate into this younger, shorter, daft little man with a bow tie and checked trousers. And yet he somehow manages to still be the Doctor. And if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have the show now. And he's easily the most influential out of all the Doctors. You can see elements of his Doctor in the likes of Matt Smith, in the likes of Tom Baker, and even Sylvester McCoy. He's always just a joy to watch, and I think he has some of the best moments in Doctor Who history, like the bit in Tomb of the Cybermen where he's talking to Victoria about family. That's a really sweet scene. In at number 4, I'm going to go with the 5th Doctor, Peter Davison. Now the reason why I put Davison up so high is because this was the second classic Doctor that I ever saw when I first started watching the classic series. Now like I mentioned with Matt Smith and Patrick Troughton before, Davison also had a pretty hard time. He was taking over from arguably the most iconic of all the Doctors. Tom Baker was the Doctor for 7 years. Like for some people, you know I was saying before about people had only seen William Hartnell? Well, in the time that Tom Baker was the Doctor, he'd done it so long, there were some kids who didn't even know about the first 3 before him. So all of a sudden, this young man comes in, who was well known on TV at the time, has to take over from that and has to contrast completely from Tom Baker. And he managed it. I like the fact that Davison is a more subdued Doctor. And what I mean by that is, he's not very alien and over the top like some of the other ones. He's a lot more vulnerable as the Doctor, but I think the Doctor has never been more heroic than when he was the 5th Doctor, the Caves of Androzani being the prime example. Davison managed to do the impossible. He took over from arguably the most well-known of all the Doctors and still make the programme a success with some of the best stories in history coming from his era. Sure, you could say that Davison's era is kind of the start of the decline of classic Doctor Who, but you can't deny he definitely added a few more years to it. So we have reached the top 3. Now in at number 3, I'm going with the 3rd Doctor, John Pertwee. Now I know that I said Peter Davison to me is arguably the most heroic Doctor, but you could also make a case for John Pertwee. He's definitely the most action-packed of all the Doctors. During the 1970s, Doctor Who went through arguably one of the biggest changes. It went through a complete overhaul. Long gone were the stories of travelling through time and space. Now the Doctor's stuck on Earth and there's a recurring cast. So seeing the Doctor on Earth is really unique, and I think none of the other Doctors could be there with Unit on Earth other than the 3rd Doctor. He is essentially the James Bond of all the Doctors. And even though I've ranked him at number 3, I have said in another video before, if I saw the TARDIS and I ran in, which Doctor would I want to see? I'd want to see John Pertwee, because I know he'd be the one to keep me safe. And honestly, I cannot think of another man out there who can pull off a cape, a velvet smoking jacket and a frilly shirt and still look like a fucking badass. Plus, he has a car. That's awesome. For me, Pertwee started what is the greatest era of Doctor Who's history, and for that, he's got to be in my top 3. So, we're into the top 2 now, and I think it should come as no surprise who they are, based on the 2 that are left, and because I mentioned both of them in quite a few of my videos. In at number 2 is the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi. Now, the thing is, Capaldi's era as a whole, I don't think is that good. I think his era is just so bogged down with so much unnecessary crap. Series 8 was the Clara show. Capaldi was on the back burner. Series 9 was pretty much, with a few exceptions, a complete and utter disaster. And Series 10 was okay, but there were certain things in there that I wasn't really keen on. That goes to show you how good I think this guy is as the Doctor, because he's my 2nd favourite. Capaldi, I think, is the most interchangeable of all the Doctors when it comes to their eras. And what I mean by that is, because I don't think that made much sense to anybody other than myself, what I mean is you can literally pick Capaldi up and drop him into any other period of Doctor Who and he works. You can plop him in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, maybe in Russell's era, maybe in Matt's era. He still works incredibly well as the Doctor. Capaldi is arguably the greatest actor to play the Doctor, at least a main series Doctor, because obviously the best actor to ever play the Doctor was Sir John Hurt. Also, people might be wondering where the War Doctor is. He's not like a main continuity Doctor, so I'm not going to include him. Same with Peter Cushing. But anyway, Capaldi just embodies everything I would want to be if I was playing the Doctor. Capaldi has given some of the most passionate and heart-wrenching moments that we have ever seen from any actor playing the Doctor. And it's such a shame that his era is bogged down with so much shit, because this man, I honestly believe, could have been the greatest out of all of the Doctors if he was given consistent great material. Look what he did with the shit that he got. He's still my 2nd favourite Doctor. That speaks volumes. So number 1, I mean, you've probably figured it out by now, and you probably already knew going into this video, if you watch my channel, who it's going to be. And I mean, if you didn't know, How? The fourth Doctor, Tom Baker. This man is the Doctor. And I don't even mean the fourth Doctor just is how the Doctor should be. I mean Tom Baker is the Doctor. There is nobody who has embodied this role or thrown themselves into the role, in my opinion at least, as much as Tom Baker. He guided the show through its golden era. Some of the best stuff consistently week after week after week in the mid-70s. The most iconic of all the Doctors, in my opinion again. Whether that's again down to his stories, whether it's the way that he looks, whether it's his voice, Tom just has it all. I can 100% buy that this dude is a fucking alien. And the way that you hear Tom talk about playing the role now, it makes you just fully understand what he was going for. He says stuff like, playing a hero is so predictable, so how do you make it interesting within all that predictability? And he does. You can tell Tom is passionate about the character, and you can feel his stamp, whether it's in the dialogue or the way that he moves. Now, I loved Doctor Who during the new series, but when I went back and watched the classic era, he was the first one that I watched. And I found myself falling in love with Doctor Who again and the character of the Doctor in a way that I didn't think I could. I always feel giddy when I see him on screen. He's just such a wonderful person to watch. He's definitely the most commanding of all the Doctors. When he's in the room, you look at him. Even if he's there grinning in the background, you're looking at him. I hope that isn't the same for my videos though, because that would be bad. The best era, the best costume, the best portrayal. It's all Tom. Then again, that should come as absolutely no surprise to absolutely everyone. And those are my rankings of the Doctor. And also, like I said at the start of this video, this is purely just my opinion, so if you happen to disagree and you think, why isn't this guy higher than that guy? You have your own list, I have mine. That's just the way the world works. Like I say, if you do happen to disagree, I don't care. But anyway guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more, follow me on social media, support me on Patreon like I mentioned at the very start of this video, and if you did any of those things, I would love you forever. But until next time guys, you take care of yourselves, goodbye.